these aliens. Positively sure I'm absolutely mad about something. Oh, I'm positively sure I'm absolutely crazy too. Oh.
Hi, my name's Mark Stallard, and welcome to Little Green Man, the show that endeavours to prove that Canadian politics is sexy. Well, I got a little pushback on social media in reaction to my video about Ontario increasing minimum wage back in January. There were two main points of contention that were brought up. I mean, arguments that seem rational on the surface, but you don't have to go very deep to see how these points are just myths. The first argument is increasing minimum wage will cause prices to go up, meaning increasing inflation. And the second issue is that businesses will take jobs overseas where the labour is cheap, so businesses can make more profit. Both of these are serious points, and neither should be dismissed out of hand. And in fact, they don't need to be. There is much evidence out there that clearly demonstrates that these arguments are weak at best. Both arguments can be boiled down to this: you can't pay people a living wage because something negative will happen to them or to someone else. And unless I'm mistaken, that's the crux of all arguments against minimum wage. Poor people must be kept poor so everyone else can be comfortable. So if inflation gets too high, you won't be able to afford things, or jobs will get shipped overseas, and blah, blah, blah. Therefore, a large segment of the population must be kept in utter poverty. As long as someone else is suffering, then you won't have to. So keep the poor poor. It is in your best interest. It doesn't sound so noble when I put it like that, does it? Let's dig a little deeper into the first argument, inflation. There is a small element of truth about this one. It's likely that when a business's expenses increase, that wages can be one of those expenses. Prices could go up to compensate. And it wouldn't be surprising that a local economy might notice a blip. But research shows that if there's any change at all in the overall provincial economy, it will be tiny, about 0.1%, as a source in the description. So if inflation held at the universally average 2% per year, it could end up going as high as 2.1%. Now, would you really notice that? Well, here's how much you'd notice that. Let's say a can of beans costs $1 a year ago. With 2% inflation, it will now cost you $1.02. But after a raise in minimum wage, it would be as high as 2.1. That can of beans would cost you $2.02. And 0.1%. A whopping 0.1% more. Now, come on, really? I mean, how would you notice, even if inflation went up by 0.5%? The very unstable nature of capitalism, it is likely to go up by that anyway, regardless of a small raise in poor people's wages. I demonstrated in a previous video that an increase of 25 cents per bus ticket could mean an increase of inflation of about 0.8% for someone making minimum wage in Manitoba. So are you okay with a 0.8% raise in inflation for poor people, but opposed to a 0.1% increase for people that can actually afford it? I mean, how selfish would that be? I mean, how obscene, how completely and totally un-Christian. And further to that, the argument that raising the minimum wage causes inflation also implies that the working poor would be personally responsible for the increase of inflation. Now, what do I have to say to that? Don't you dare blame the poor and the powerless for inflation. Don't you dare. So consider this. Minimum wage wasn't even a thing until the end of the 19th century. That's the late 1800s. Capitalism has been going since at least the 1500s. It started with something called enclosure. It's a precursor to privatization. I'll talk about that in another video. Historical data shows that inflation has been growing at about an average of 2% per year since then. And during the period, there were literal slaves and peasants doing the work. Keeping workers at their poorest did not curb inflation then. So inflation is inherent in the capitalist system. Now, I have a challenge for you. Name one person, just one person, who's not making enough money to live on, who made the decision to increase the prices on products. Name just one person, can you? I mean, you take your time, I'll wait. Of course you can't, because that decision is not made by the poor and the powerless. That decision is made by the business owners themselves. It is this blind obsession with making more and more profit. It is inherent in capitalism itself. Profit drives inflation. It is the powerful that raise prices, not the poor and powerless, because the poor literally have no power to change the economy. They literally have no power to change anything, even their own low status. But capitalists do. Now the next argument says, but the poor business person trying to make a living can't compete against mass-produced products being made in other countries that have a much lower minimum wage, or no minimum wage. I mean, that's really a joke of an argument. If that situation offends you, then why are you patronizing companies that use virtual slave labor? I mean, examine yourself, examine your own purchasing behavior. It's obvious to both sides, working people who claim to be on the left and working people who claim to be on the right, that the problem is with Canada abdicating control of its own resources, not producing products but selling resources off cheap to other nations, then buying them back. The resource is now refined and packaged with a massive profit on the top for the rich investors. Now, the self-identifying right will blame Trudeau for the deals with China, and they're right to do so. But the solution must not be to sit back and play the game that Trudeau took over from Harper. Oh yes, Stephen Harper was no better. He was the biggest cheerleader for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a horrifying pro-corporate neoliberal giveaway to corporations and the rich people that own them. Harper even lauded the TPP, saying it would be in Canada's best interests. Wait a second, isn't that what the exact phrase that Justin Trudeau is using to justify the Kinder Morgan pipeline? Selling off natural resources on the cheap? But I digress. The idea that free trade agreements are wonderful for us, like NAFTA and the still future TPP, yes, it's still a threat, was and is a bald-faced lie from both Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau. This isn't a liberal versus conservative issue. They're in it together. Both parties are in it together. Now, as far as neoliberalism is concerned, my definition of which is corporations doing what they want, when they want, to whom they want, with impunity. The federal liberals and the conservatives are two peas in a pod. Our leaders, for the past 40 years, are to blame for dragging our country to the far right. And what is at the far right that is so urgent that we get there so quickly? Well, the far right is where the pockets and the coffers of corporations and the rich people that own them just happen to reside. So looking at the underlying argument, we must not measure a minimum wage because the poor businessman might take their jobs outside of Canada. In other words, don't change anything. But minimum wage has been getting worse right across North America for decades. Corporations and the rich people that own them still move jobs overseas anyway. They don't care. They've been doing it all along, and they will continue to do it, dragging down the Canadian standard of living for all of us as they get richer. So if you truly think the current situation is wrong, and if you're a human you should, then take action to change it. Don't let your representatives and or party of choice get away with pushing these destructive neoliberal policies. Instead, insist that they change or threaten to vote for someone else. Make them understand that you are serious. And to you, I say, Goyagi, get off your arse and get involved. It's up to you to make change happen. The solution starts with putting people first. Anything less would literally be inhuman. Little Green Man. This is the back door to the Manitoba legislature. Now, if you hit the subscribe button now, hit the notification bell, then you won't be surprised when they try to stick something up your back door. Hi, my name is Marshall. Welcome to Little Green Man. The start of 2018, the first month, has been kind of a monumental one for Ontario, raising the minimum wage to $14 an hour, with intent of raising it to $15 an hour. And of course, 4 weeks of data is finally in. We've waited so long for it, and everybody are jumping to absolutely ridiculous and insane conclusions. Absolutely ridiculous. It's insane. So I'm going to talk about an article in the Financial Post, financialpost.com. Link is in the description. You'll see it there as the main article. I'm going to talk about this one because this was the first article that came to my attention, and it's the one I'm most familiar with. The thing that's kind of funny about this is these statistics came out, and it seems like the neoliberals media just went nuts with this and saying, see, raising minimum wage is really, really bad and is an immediate and absolutely devastating results. Actually, let's read through the article and we'll see what really happened. And is there any truth in that at all? So the Financial Business Post.com had this article headline: Canada just lost the most jobs in 9 years, with biggest drop on record in part-time work. And it actually goes on to say it was payback time for Canada's labour market in January, with the biggest monthly job loss since the last recession, all part-time, as employers faced quickening wage gains. Right, so that sets the scene. It doesn't say it explicitly, but it really leaves you with the absolute, without any real doubt, that this drop must have been absolutely connected to the minimum wage. Well, there are some issues with that statement and with that lead-in. It is completely and totally false. It is very misleading at best. Reading through the article, just a couple of paragraphs later, it actually says the employment drop coincided with an increase in minimum wage in Canada's largest province, Ontario. And so it says right there, it was a coincidence. It did coincide. There was the two things did seem to happen at the same time, but that was really that's all the evidence they've got. Timing. Now, if we were to look at, there's an article. I'm going to put this chart up on the screen right now, so you can see what I'm seeing. There's a chart got job gains hit sharp stop in January. There's a net change in labour force. And you can see it. I mean, if you just blur your vision just a little bit, you can see it goes up and down, and it goes up and down really quite regularly. So we're starting in 2000. This chart starts in 2012. So if we look at mid 2012, it starts to go down towards the end of 2013. Real job gains are really lacking. They're right for those 6 months or so between 2013 and 2014. It seems to pick up a little bit with a little blip around November, December of 2014. And then it goes down and hits the trend seems to die off there at the end of 2015, beginning of 2016. And then the trend in the middle of 2016 picks up in a far bigger way, showing far more job growth than all those other years have seen. So this is a massive jump with an anomalous jump in November, December of 2017. Look at those spikes on the end of 2017. They stand out. It's only at the beginning of 2012 you see anything bigger. And so we have this sudden drop. So job gains have dropped in 2018. But it looks to me like it was going to go up. It was the job gains were going up. They were going down. They're going up and they're going down quite regularly. And the fact that it went up in September, October, November, December of 2017 at all was an absolute surprise and stunning. So to expect all those jobs to suddenly, or those job creation to suddenly go away, that it's not really that surprising. And it was really expected, and it came later than one might guess it would by looking at this graph here, this chart, I mean. And with that first glance of that chart, the very first paragraph that follows it, it even admits now the report is a long-awaited correction in a tightening labour market that is more consistent with an economy that has been slowing down since the second half of last year. They admit it right there. This has nothing to do with the minimum wage. It's just coincidentally something that they were expecting to happen, because the ups in the job growth could not have continued going up. They had to have come down at some point. And so then when we look at those job gains, it was really just a drop in part-time jobs. Full-time jobs did not lose. Those continued to raise, certainly not as much. And something that this article does not say is, what happened to those part-time jobs? What are some possibilities? It's possible some of these part-time jobs may become full-time jobs. I mean, it's possible those jobs just don't exist and those people are unemployed. But I think that one of the biggest things to note is that this article says, doesn't say it in this article, but there was another article that said along these lines that since 2009, since the crash, rather, 2008, that the unemployment rate in Ontario is almost as high as it's been since that crash, and only 1% down on the previous year. So to say that this is a big loss in minimum wage are going to cause job losses, the economy is going to suffer, absolutely gone. This article even says this was expected and has nothing, and then we can read into that has nothing to do with minimum wage. Now, of course, I've got to end this with some headlines from some other articles that use the same data that was absolutely ridiculous. They were doing the same ones, making the same approach with the same, pretending the minimum wage and the job losses in the part-time area were related. CBC reprinted an article, and the headline is, Ontario sheds 39,000 part-time jobs in January as new $14 minimum wage begins. Canoe.com repeated this almost word for word. Ontario sheds 59,000 part-time jobs in January following the $14 minimum wage. And there were several other examples where they pretty much copied and pasted, maybe made a very slight change. Bloomberg, blame Ontario minimum wage hike for Canada job purge or not. They know right there in the article that this is just inflammatory stuff that they just want to grab attention. Clickbait. That's all this is. And then Vice Money goes on to say that Canada lost 88,000 jobs in January, most of them in Ontario, and goes on to say in the opening paragraphs that it was possibly could it be due to the minimum wage raise in Ontario. It's just absolutely dishonest, complete reporting, completely dishonest, trying to lead a conversation to where it shouldn't be going. This is absolutely factless. Now, if you're still in doubt about the minimum wage and is it good for the economy, then there is the National Employment Law Project wrote this 10-page paper, Raise Wages, Kill Jobs. It is about a 10-page paper. You can read through it. Or Business Insider has a very decent summary on this 2016 report. Read through that. There's lots of good information, and we'll give you some actual data right from the 1930s to present day, how the minimum wage, when it goes up, does not in any way affect the economy in any lasting way. So let me leave you with this. All these scaremongering about the minimum wage and how it's going to hurt the economy is just corporations, it's just neoliberals, people with conservative views that businesses are that which must be worshipped, and therefore we must protect their profits because profits are the holy grail of business. But I say this, if you cannot afford as a business, as a corporation, and I'm not talking to small businesses here, I'm talking to those people that really can afford to pay your people with your millions and billions of dollars of profits. If you can't afford to pay your staff a living wage, then you can't afford to be in business. Little green man. This is the back door to the Manitoba legislator. Now, if you hit the subscribe button now, hit the notification bell, then you won't be surprised when they try to stick something up your back door.